Well, welcome. So we have reached finally the 22nd letter of Meditations on Matera, which is the final meditation. So this series is drawing to its close. We might do another final wrap-up episode where we try to tie different things together, but this is the last letter that we'll be presenting to you. And this one is the world. And I just wanted to go ahead and open it up to Michael and Sherry first. And what are your thoughts? What are your takeaways? What do you want to? Where do we want to begin this? We want to start with the phenomenology of the card, like we often do, or is there something else that you think that you would like to start with?
Well, I was surprised because I have been thinking about something a lot lately about the magic of images, right?
Yeah.
And he gets into that here, and I forgot. Well, it's probably 4 years since I read this chapter, 5, whatever it was. I did that series, so I wasn't really conscious that's where we headed to. But the interesting thing with image, I mean, this is our culture operates on this. We're actually moving away from the word into the image, right? Which is why we do these videos and don't write stuff down. Or people don't read books, they watch videos, right? Listen to podcasts. But this is the thing, right? Is that and I noticed this over COVID because I was teaching. And for that first year, well, the first year, the first semester, they sent us all home to complete the semester online. But then the next year, we started in masks, and so I never learned the kids' names. Not usually by the third week, I know just about everybody's name, but I never really learned their names. Not even at the end of the semester, maybe to a couple of kids, but usually I had everybody down. But I noticed one day I'm walking across the campus and this one student did not have her mask on. And I saw her face and I realized that my imagination had been building her the bottom part of her face. And I did a horrible job, by the way. But I filled in the blanks, right? And I'm like, whoa, I didn't think that's the bottom of your face looked like. And it happened with several other students. And this is imagination that does that, right?
Yeah.
Just spontaneously, without me even putting any will to it.
Yeah.
But then you also and this is also the reason it's kind of turned into an absurdity, but Rudolf Steiner, you've probably seen the Waldorf dolls.
Yeah.
My wife is looking at me through the crack in the door and it's creeping me out. Yeah. Okay. That was creeping me. It was like I'm being spied on. But anyway, what? It was a whole Illuminati.
By a benevolent spy, though.
But anyway, so this is why Rudolf Steiner recommended that children not have dolls that cry and pee and open their eyes. You know what I mean? Remember we had those gravity dolls where you would move them and their eyes would open for it.
Yeah.
And not do that, not make them look lifelike, make them like a rag doll. Even my oldest daughter, she's 26. She was little. Okay. She made dolls out of dried corn cobs.
No, yeah, nice.
So I have
the reason being because this is the reason he said that is when you give that to a child, the child's imagination works on it, right? So it fills up with what's
fills
going
in the gaps.
But this is also used for devious purposes, and this is how a lot of advertising works. But they have images that are incomplete or suggest something that your brain does the rest, right? And it's also how mass formation works, where you get half of the image and then you fill up the rest.
So right? It's so funny that you're talking about this, Michael, because literally the thing I was talking about on Discord right before I got on for this conversation was I was defending C.S. Lewis's fiction against people who were saying oh, he doesn't develop characters. And in precisely the way I was defending Lewis's fiction is that what Lewis is doing is, particularly since, like, take the Narnia books where he's writing for young readers, he's leaving gaps for the imagination to fill in the blanks. And this is what this is the last paragraph I wrote right before I got on this conversation. I wrote this at 7:47 a.m. So just 15 minutes before we got on to talk. I read Tolkien later in childhood. I was 10 when I read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit for myself. My mom read The Hobbit to me when I was much younger. This might be a factor, as I suggested. I was reading the Narnia book as to why I like Lewis better than Tolkien. I was reading the Narnia books at a much younger age, and one of my most vivid early memories is of my mom reading me Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I must have been about 3 years old, and I remember being absolutely in love with Reepicheep. And I didn't need Lewis to develop the character of Reepicheep. I was Reepicheep. My imagination filled in the gaps. Later, when I read Rostand and encountered Cyrano, I already knew him. I had met him in Narnia in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's how it works. And now, do you guys know this book? Do I have it in the room here? Eros and Magic in the Renaissance. Do you know this
You know
book?
what? I have it.
You
I
do?
bought it, and I
You
haven't.
bought it? Oh,
By Culiano, right?
Yes, I won't.
And he's right on the money with this, right?
I got to read that book.
This is how magic works.
Yeah.
Is you do it. You
Yeah.
know, it's suggestive, and you make the subject do all the work.
So it's funny that you bring up that book, because the next Grail Country project that I'm starting to form in my mind is actually on the to do a series on the transformation of Eros, probably starting with the Divine Comedy and then moving through other works to just work on that theme. So
Yeah.
You want to go?
How many monks will be involved? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Like that one. I wonder if that one guy's gonna pipe in today. What was it when he was? Remember the last time? What were you talking about? And he jumped on because he had been on that thing with Paul and all those people talking about marriage and sex and stuff.
Oh yeah.
The neurotic guy, hey neurotic guy, whatever. It's just too funny, you know. You can tell,
by the way, I had Martin Shaw email me and told me how much he appreciated it. He saw that video of that live stream of Paul's where we talked about the changing attitude of the church towards sex versus the early church versus the contemporary church. And he emailed me to tell me how much he appreciated my contributions to that conversation.
Well, good.
And that he was going to catch up on Grail Country and be back in touch. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that was so anyway, so it's a good topic.
Well, yeah, and because obviously there's a close connection between Eros and beauty. And so Tom Berg is talking about beauty and the relationship between the beautiful and the good as he's weaving his theme here on this meditation on the major arcana of the world.
Hey, by the way, speaking of magic, this is totally random. Okay, check it out. Guess what this is?
Divining rods.
Yes.
I've seen
them this morning.
Did you?
Yeah.
What do you?
Well, because I made them because a friend of mine gave me these clay pipes and some feldspar to make some cosmic towers, which are draw that. So I had to find where the ley lines are on my farm.
What are cosmic towers?
They're well, it's basically Stonehenge, but low tech, right?
Okay.
And I could get actually big stones, but that might be too much work.
Yeah.
But that's, and so I went out there. I was like, right, and my son was watching me out the door. What are you doing? So I had him do it. It worked for him too. It works for everybody, just about.
So you're looking for ley lines with it? And what does it do? And
well, I want to amplify the energy that's crossing the farm.
Right. So no, my question, I've seen them tipping for water, right? But do they do the same thing for ley lines?
Yes.
They tip up and down. Okay.
And it was interesting. Now, we're nothing like being sidetracked. This is we're all saying today.
Yeah, I think we probably need to explain to the audience what ley lines are.
I will. So ley lines are lines of energy, and they've been actually mapped that in Europe in particular that connect many of the major cathedrals in sometimes a star shape, sometimes whatever shape.
And lots of the old like Stonehenge type.
Stonehenge and those places
Yeah.
for sure,
Mhm.
right? So, and I knew it would, I know where I live used to be a Native American meeting ground. So it was interesting and here's the thing though. So I'm out there and I couldn't find anything, but I'm out there, dousing, and finally it hit a couple of spots. And then I started to follow the line where it was going. And it went in a kind of a diagonal, kind of northeast to southwest. And one of the places it hit was actually my maypole out in the pasture.
Oh, interesting.
Where I just had I told you I think I'm putting this one up and I'm leaving it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I happened to hit the ley line.
Oh, that's really cool. That's very cool.
Well, yeah. So anyway, and by the way, Sherry, thank your great country for sending all this smoke my way.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad I don't have it. Usually my summers are spent in smoke. But for some reason the gods have spared me this year.
Yeah,
So-
usually we have that problem here too. Like normally Pacific Northwest, it's like we have wildfires every summer.
California,
we will,
Oregon,
yeah, we will
British
later.
Columbia,
Yeah.
just
But
every summer.
Quebec's
Quebec.
wet.
It is. It's like just a swamp.
Yeah, and the same with Michigan. So we don't have once in a while you have once in a great while, maybe they're not very big and they'll have wildfires here.
Has it been dry there though? Like just sorry, audience.
Quebec, here it was dry for about a month. Still a little dry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
But
so I would say that in a way we're kind of talking about this chapter because what we're talking about right now
is the world,
are the harmonies and disharmonies of the world, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the world.
Which is what and Talberg begins this meditation with some quotes. And he refers to the quotes as like a musical prelude to what he's talking about. And then he refers to the figure on the card as being in dance.
Right. And he drops an epigraph from Nietzsche, which is going to get you in trouble with the tradies, right?
Well, this is the only time I think he's ever said anything ever presented anything from Nietzsche in a favorable light in the entire book. But he's like, oh, this one. He's right. He just says he's right. That's all he says.
Okay, before we go into the book, I want to say one little thing about divining.
Sure. Do we want to share the bit of Nietzsche that
when I first moved here, the well digging companies, the local ones, they actually knew all the local diviners. And if you wanted them to drill on your property, they recommended first that you contact them and then they would find the spot. And they don't do it anymore.
Interesting.
That's only in 23 years. In 23 years now, they no longer contact I think probably many of them are gone.
Okay, so I started to say this when Michael first brought it up, but if we start to think of the world as having a harmony that you can bring yourself into union with, then all of a sudden something like divining a well doesn't seem so strange.
No. And I like that too. Sherry was just talking, a friend of mine, she's 75 now, but she remembers in the 60s and 50s when she was a kid that her uncle worked for the power company and they always had hazel wands in their trucks when they would get out. So they would douse first, ask questions later.
I love it. I love it. And it's all going away. And that makes me sad.
But we here at Grail Country are bringing it back.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
That's
So,
right.
so I'm actually going to read all three of the quotes that he has at the beginning of this meditation.
I'm gonna just
'Cause
show everybody a picture of the thing while you read.
Yes, there we go. There it is.
Mine's
So
not.
we have, do we want to talk about it? So we have the angel and the eagle and the bull and the lion and the four corners. And the figure is surrounded by a garland, naked, wearing a scarf and dancing.
And holding a wand
And holding a wand and a filter, yeah.
And I think that word filter actually works. Like, even though it's not spelled filter,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
still
Well,
works.
it's like that the filter in that spelling is like a potion. It's like
I know,
like a love filter.
but it is still a filter,
Yeah, yeah.
right? It still
Sure.
acts as a filter
Yeah.
in the modern
Yeah.
sense.
So here's the quotations he begins with. When he drew a circle in the face of the deep, then I was at work beside him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the sons of men. Proverbs 8.
Sophia.
Yep. And then joy, deeper yet than woe, she saith woe, hence go. Yet joy would have eternity, profound eternity. Friedrich Nietzsche, thus spake Zarathustra. One only.
I want to.
You want to read the German?
I want to read the German because
Okay.
German has so much more to say. And if Laura watches this, she might even be able to add or correct me, because I'm not a translator, but I'll just do my best. Lust is the word that Nietzsche uses for joy, and Lust is we have the word lust, right? And it's like the word Sehnsucht, like longing. We have the word longing for that. Longing is not enough, in my opinion, for Sehnsucht. Sehnsucht is senses and searching senses, right? And Lust is like that. It contains way more than joy. It's like a desire for life, something like that, to me anyway.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Well, but there you go. But like, that's like, isn't that like potentially the desire for life? Isn't that potentially a kind of a way into understanding
Eros.
the concept of Eros? Yeah, exactly. It's like life desiring life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tiefer noch als Herzeleid, which is deeper still than Herz is your heart, and Leid is suffering. So deeper still than a suffering heart, right?
Oh, that's one of the characters in the Grail. And parts is Herzeleudi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, suffering heart. Weh spricht vergeh. Weh. So see, they translate woe, Herzeleid as woe, and then weh as woe. But weh is when something has done you harm. Like you have, it can be sickness, it can be somebody tut dir weh, like they hurt you, right? So weh says go away, right?
So it's almost a reference to both physical and moral evil.
All kinds. Yeah. Like in Swiss, the word for homesickness is Heimweh. So it hurts you. That's really the takeaway for me. Doch alle Lust will Ewigkeit. But all lust, in the German sense, right? Joy and this lust for life wants eternity, wants deep eternity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better.
Right. Well, that's it. But that's like that a point that actually, that's really good, because that points directly to what the deepest sense of Eros is pointing toward our desire to have infinite life.
Interesting.
Yeah, it also revitalizes the word joy for us. It should anyway. Like, what is joy? Like, people have that. Yeah, they have it. because it's fractal, right? So there's a deep joy, and in English we lack the vocabulary for that. So we have to describe it as profound or superficial, or we have to talk about the layers, right? But in German, the words are dedicated to those layers. So yeah.
You're making me want to learn German, Sherry.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're making me get this. So it's been kind of nagging at me. I haven't gotten around to doing it, to write an essay or something on Nietzsche as theologian.
No, that I would love to hear
Because
that.
especially now that I think I understand him better now that I'm so pissed off the Catholic Church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
And I think,
you're empathizing with him.
well,
Yeah.
I get it. I just
Mhm.
he's given to hyperbole, of course. But I get it.
But that's always subjective, though. I mean,
get it.
hyperbole, some people,
And
it could be coming
necessary
from the
criticism.
Well, I think there's like
Yeah.
there's a certain, you have a certain kind of like shared sensibility with Nietzsche too, right? And that like you don't like Nietzsche was also like longing for what was lost, the good that was lost of the pagan world.
Yeah.
That the kind of like stale, hyper intellectualized Christianity of his era had just like destroyed.
And I think that was also the case with Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Yeah.
Who was always derided or characterized as an atheist. He was no atheist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Not...
They were talking about loss, and they were grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, and it's like, I mean,
what their Keats and Shelley both with their desire for the classical age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's Sophia that they're missing. That's what they're missing. That's what's been driven out. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Nate, but yeah.
No. That was all very good. And I actually like, I think Nietzsche, like, I think there's that aspect of him too, but there's also aspects of him that get like deeply seduced by the mirage that Tomberg talks about here too. So, but yeah, there's definitely like, he has a genuine sense of loss and a genuine sense of longing for something that has really been lost, for sure. And then the last quote is very short. It's just one truly lives only when one dances, Isadora Duncan.
What page is that one on? Do you remember?
That's on the very, like, that's before that's like, this is
there.
Yeah.
Is there a German
Those are the
translation?
quotes, and then he says the above quotations are a musical or prelude to the 22nd major arcana of the tarot of the world. And I was thinking about that. I know that's like that's the idea that one truly lives only when one dances. There's something about like dancing is like the maximal act of participation.
Well, we just talked about this. I talked about this with Yosef yesterday, just briefly, about God. God leads and we follow, right? And I mentioned, I said, oh, that he talked about dancing close to the flames. And let me see if I can find it. And I said, that really gives the verse, all we like sheep have gone astray, a whole new meaning, right? Because dancing is also like a leading and a following, right? That's what it is. Like one leads and one follows in dancing. And so yeah, I just found that.
But also, in order to do it well, you can't think about it, right? You have to enter into it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what duende, that idea, where that comes from. And I don't know if you know this story, it's true, that in Moorish Spain they would have these dances, like Sufis would have these dances that would go take place at night, and once in a while one of the performers would just get
wound out.
It would just be there, and when that happened, which didn't happen very often, but when it did happen, all the other people in the crowd or the participants would say Allah, 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 which became much later Ole, 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 right? Where you saw something, divinity that was lighting something up, right?
Yeah.
That's sophiology right there. That's straight up sophiology, yo.
So
It is.
It is.
People,
it
it
is.
drives me nuts. People want to turn sociology into an intellectual system.
yeah.
Yeah, really.
Here's
Yeah.
the quote from,
If that's what it is, then to hell with it.
yeah.
To paraphrase. Yeah.
To paraphrase Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
This is the quote from Joseph yesterday. I don't know how to say this. It's Dveikus, means cleaving to the divine, is the highest form of any love, because it is a humble holding back of oneself from the fires of God while dancing as close as possible to the flames. Yeah.
I approve this message.
and then I said, when I read that quote, I thought of something that I saved from David Whyte a long time ago, the poet. Close is what we all almost always are. Close to happiness, close to another, close to leaving, close to tears, close to God, close to losing faith, close to being done, close to saying something, or close to success. And even with the greatest sense of satisfaction, close to giving the whole thing up. Our human essence lies not in arrival, but in being almost there. We are creatures who are on the way. Our journey, a series of impending anticipated arrivals. We live by unconsciously measuring the inverse distances of our proximity, an intimacy calibrated by the vulnerability we feel in giving up our sense of separation. To go beyond our normal identity and become closer than close is to lose our sense of self in temporary joy, a form of arrival that only opens us up to deeper forms of intimacy that blur our fixed, controlling surface identity. To consciously become close is a courageous form of unilateral disarmament, a chancing of our arm and our love, a willingness to hazard our affection, and an unconscious declaration that we might be equal to the inevitable loss that the vulnerability of being close will bring. Human beings do not find their essence through fulfillment or eventual arrival, but by staying close to the way they like to travel, to the way they hold the conversation between the ground on which they stand and the horizon to which they go. We are, in effect, always close to the ultimate secret that we are more real in our simple wish to find a way than any destination we could reach. The step between not understanding that and understanding that is as close as we get to happiness. So good. Anyway, I just had to share
He's
those.
pretty close there.
Good.
He really took that a step further.
He gets close.
That's close. Yeah.
So so Michael, there's a work that he references here early on. So you've heard talks about the idea of the world as a work of art, as
Yes,
like
I
kind
love
of
that.
a way of entering into this concept. And I was thinking about like what I was thinking a bit, I was going a bit beyond what's on the page and like just kind of contemplating on the idea of the world as a work of art and what that means about the creator, creation, the relationship between the creator and the creation. And if an artist in creating a work of art, if we're gonna ride with this analogy, the artist in creating a work of art is also transformed by the work, just as it is transformed by the artist. There's a mutuality in that relationship.
Mhm.
So that, which suggests this idea as like, I mean, to me, as a Christian, this relates to the idea of Christ as like the aspect of becoming that is in divinity itself, right? That allows the divinity itself, which the rational mind wants to conceive of only being like as just being and unchangeable, actually also contains this potential, this becoming, and that becomes fitted to the very creation that it creates. Just and I think like this metaphor of of the world as a work of art like allows us into that, because if we think about our own creative endeavors, we can see the way in which yes, we are shaping, but we are also being shaped at the same time as we do that work of creation.
Well, yeah, and I think and the next page from that, he's making a connection, but I don't think he's very explicit about it. But the way to a creative person is still a child, right?
Yeah.
That's a child can enter in when they're playing. I'll never forget, I was a school teacher, and the kids come in from recess and they run in there, and this boy Fielding says, "I'm first." And I was already in the room. I said, "No, you're not. I'm first." He said, "Nope, you're not in our world."
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning when I was sharing like the quote, like when I was talking about my experience of like having my mom read the Voyage of the Dawn Treader to me when I'm 3 years old. And it's like I was like, I didn't need Lewis to fill out the character of Reepicheep for me to absolutely captivate my, like I was able to become that character like effortlessly.
Oh yeah.
But that's because you were 3. Like, I just want to read this quote here from
Yeah,
Laban
but Sherry, that memory has stayed with me for a reason. Like, so
Oh,
like
I know.
like there's like, I mean,
Because that was because that was more real than everything else.
Exactly.
After.
Right.
That's why.
And I still see echoes of that all the time.
Yeah. Like I have a very vivid memory of my childhood because my imagination was like super active and overactive. And I always told people that had children, don't underestimate your kid, okay? Because they probably know a lot more than you do. Like, because I just remember thinking adults were dumb. Lots.
Yeah.
So dumb.
Oh
But
my.
anyway, I want to read this. I want to read this quote here on page 627
That's the
by
one. Yeah.
Edgar Dacke.
Mm-hmm.
Schopenhauer once said that things appear to the child so bathed in splendor and of such a paradisical nature because they experience naively in each particular thing the idea of type, species. This splendor of inner reality is entirely lost for man who has attained to the maturity of rational thought. When he comes out of the childlike state of animated and living perception and is given over to laws of pure abstraction. That's why it isn't real. Like to a kid, it's not real anymore when it's purely abstracted.
Well, go to the next part.
Thus, each time we are in the state of experiencing the idea and form, we are like the child within nature. Goethe was such a child. If therefore, as I have tried to show all along, man is the archetype of the evolutionary history of species and the center of living nature, if the animal kingdom, as the ancients already knew, is man disintegrated, which we can now take in a realistic sense, then we have a solid basis for all totemism and animal cults that is well-founded from a standpoint of natural science. And I have been thinking about this ever since you had that conversation, Michael, with Martin Shaw. And he asked you guys, what do you think of animism? I mean, actually, I've been rewatching the series I did on the imagination essay, and I mentioned something about it in there. So I've actually been thinking about it longer. But I guess that when he asked that question, it revivified the thought for me. And I was thinking about it in terms of fully God and fully man, right? The two natures of Christ. And you know, like in animism, the animal or the element or whatever, you know, the weather, the thunder was fully God, right? Fully Thor and fully thunder. Like they were, and I heard Martin talk about this.
The God thunder and not the God of thunder.
Well, yeah, like he talked about separating them as a denaturing of them, of it, right? Anyway, that's just a sideline, but I've been thinking a lot about that.
But when he points to Goethe as an example of a person who could enter nature, you know, of course, you know, in my gloss here in my book is Traherne. That's, you know, how like an angel came I down, how bright are all things here, when first among his works I did appear.
Yeah,
you know, so Traherne's entire body of work is like an instruction manual about how to enter into the kingdom again.
Yeah.
like you could as a child.
Yeah.
And he complains that it's our, well, I'm paraphrasing, but Traherne says the reason we don't is because we have a shit education system that breeds it out of us.
Yeah, abstracts it all out.
And I think we could even go for, to bring it into modern terms, contemporary moment. That's the problem with AI created art works of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the imagination? There's no imagination.
Mm-hmm. There's no child.
And there's no entering into the realm of the spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no way for the realm of the spirit to enter us, because like I used an example of Duende earlier, but anybody who writes music or poetry or whatever, right? Sometimes you look at it and go, wow, where'd that come from?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? How did that? Whoa, I thought that. That's like Robert Frost, somebody asked him, why do you write poetry? He goes, well, when I write poetry, I tell myself things I didn't know that I knew.
Right. And
well,
I was talking about this in my conversation with Ted yesterday, and it's like I was connecting the writing poetry to the concept of witness, because like when you're writing poetry, like there's a way in which like you have to get beyond the pure subject object divide in order to like properly bear witness to whatever it is that you're writing the poem about, which means it can't all be you. There's no way it could be.
Yeah, like there's a quote here in the imagination essay. This is going to come up a lot, guys, but because I was just like, it was just popping in every word. So he's talking about well, maybe I'll just read ahead. So, gazing about him in pain, the man suddenly beholds the material form of his immaterial condition. There stands his thought. God thought it before him and put its picture there ready for him when he wanted it. So these are the forms. And Tomberg actually has the same conception of the forms, which I really loved. And then he says, the man cannot look around him long enough without perceiving some form, aspect, or movement of nature, some relation between its forms or between such and himself, which resembles the state or motion within him. This he seizes as the symbol, as the garment or body of his invisible thought, presents it to his friend, and his friend understands him. Every word so employed with a new meaning is henceforth born of the spirit and not of the flesh, born of the imagination and not of the understanding, and is henceforth submitted to a new law of growth and modification.
And that's what I think. I mean, and I think this is important with the theme of imagination that is in this chapter, this letter, because imagination can either be wholesome or diabolical, or it's neutral too. And I was, I've been reading your boy, George MacDonald's what's it called, the Carasoin.
Yeah,
I've been reading that. I love it. But he's a perfect example of somebody who can enter into imagination, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Tolkien and Lewis loved him so much, because he can do it. He goes into
he does it.
And that's what I've been doing that a little bit here and there in this book of poetry I'm writing, trying to investigate the imaginative landscape of my actual landscape of where I live.
Oh, beautiful. Right? Oh, I can't wait for that.
And which has been kind of, and this has been, I've had a lot of those, whoa, where'd that come from moments, right? Because I undertook it as an experiment, right? Because I really wanted to kind of explore those spiritual and psychological depths that are in this place that's so in my skin, right? And I'm so much part of this environment. But that's why actually when way back in the day I wrote a play in blank verse on John Dee, just to see if I could do it, see how, so I get into Shakespeare's mindset when he was writing, right? But this idea, though, that in fact, Jacques Maritain talks about this, right? Because imagination is a powerful and potentially dangerous thing, right? And so one of the things Maritain talks about is you know, he how's he put it? If you send an angel among your brothers, if you create a work of imagination that draws on evil or wickedness or something,
Yeah.
he says it's like sending an angel of death among your brothers, and it
Yeah.
kills without a sound, right?
Yeah.
And because so many of the images we take into ourselves, they all go in, right? It's like it's either health food or junk food, or maybe there's neutral food. Maybe it's, you know what I mean? But it goes
Yeah.
in, and you
Mhm.
digest those images just like you digest food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
different part of your being. And
Yeah. And
your health,
yeah, and that processed food doesn't, it lives outside of the laws of nature. Like if you think about it, right? Like it isn't something that nature put together, right? It's all synthesized. And the body doesn't recognize it.
yeah.
Because it's outside of the laws of nature. Like I'm thinking about this in terms of, I'm really pushing my point here, but I'm thinking about this in terms of the of the fantastic imagination, because he talks about the law that when you're writing a fairy tale, you have to remain within the law, and he just does this little thing here where he says, the laws of the spirit of man must hold alike in this world and in any world he may invent. It were no offense to suppose a world in which everything repelled itself instead of attracted the things around it. It would be wicked or evil, as you said, to write a tale representing a man it called good as always doing bad things, or a man it called bad as always doing good things. The notion itself is absolutely lawless. In physical things, a man may invent. In moral things, he must obey and take their laws with him into his invented world as well. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
You know,
well, in this quote that Schomburg drops on the next page on 628 from Josephine Paladin, right? With respect to geniuses, they are intuitive people who bring to expression supernatural laws with images.
Yes, that I know.
Influx from beyond, and they are in direct relationship with the occult. Neither Dante nor Shakespeare nor Goethe carried out evocations, and all three understood the occult. They were wisely content to create eternal images, and in this they were incomparable mages.
Right, and you know, right? George,
they gave airy nothing a local habitation and a name, right?
Yeah, and George MacDonald says that if you have a properly cultured imagination, if you live and move and have your being within divine imagination, with no education, you will understand the very nature of things. And he cites Goethe, right?
Well, in a way, though, like images. I'm gonna think about this in terms of poetry again, because poetry is rooted in the image. But what the image is like a sense beyond sense, right? Because like when you read a poem that is filled with like concrete images, it, in a way, it's like it's evoking the senses, but it's not really it's like an image that suggests the sense. So it's like in some ways it's actually it's pointing beyond the world of senses. And the other way I talked about this in my conversation with Ted is there's a way in which, like, in as much as the focus is on the senses, you're only seeing the parts. But what a good poem does is that it senses all the different elements of sense that it's evoking with its images come together to form a concrete whole. And that's what gives you that like sense of epiphany at the end of a well-written poem.
Well, the images, I would say this, the images, and those images can be in the form of actual representations. They can also be in the form of, like, if you're in the world of the senses, then it's something that's affecting your sense of touch, your sense of smell, all those senses,
any
right?
of them, yes.
And they all evoke images. But those things, and I've learned this from George MacDonald, those things already contain a meaning because they come from the imagination of God. Okay. So, and I love the way that he sets the setting for us, that it is within the imagination of God that we live and move and have our being, which is creation. So all the forms contain the meaning already. It's given.
Yeah, and it's the discovered meaning. This is why it drives me crazy when Jordan Peterson wants to link the idea of meaning to utility. It's like, no, that's the precise opposite of what you should not do. Like, that's the meaning that we are arbitrarily giving to it. And it's not the meaning that we are discovering that is given by God when we are thinking about anything in terms of merely its utility.
Yeah.
That's why before we started recording, that's actually why I was trying to say, like, no, like Tomberg goes too far in critiquing the idea of folly and the superfluous, because there's something good there, because the spirit of folly does not value anything for its utility alone, in as much as it values anything. And in fact, I would say that the only reason that the spirit of folly can value anything is for love of the thing itself. So he's trying to turn something that I think is absolutely holy, and by the way, I would say connected to the spirit of the child, and trying to turn it into something that is unholy.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to hear, like, where does he talk about that precisely? What quote it?
Yeah, hold on a second.
I mean, I did see a quote here about folly. Where did I see that? Folly is a noisy woman, page 634.
That might be it. Whoop. 634.
Joy is the accordance of rhythms. Solomon speaks of the primordial joy, which is the accordance of divine creative rhythm and the artistic creation of wisdom.
Yeah, and then you have the other Solomon quote about folly.
But he speaks
it's like that general section where he
of another joy.
Yeah.
Which is folly. And then he quotes Proverbs.
Yeah, but right here. Yeah, this step 2 again adds the last verse. But hasten away, delay not in place, neither fix thine eye upon her, for shalt thou go through strange water, but thou shouldst abstain from strange water, and drink not of a strange fountain, that thou mayest live strong, and years of life may be added to thee. There is therefore the joy of wisdom and the joy of intoxication called strange water in the text of the Septuagint. So he's wanting to link this idea of right here. Here's where he gets to the main point. Similarly, it is to the discipline without sense that the false Holy Spirit, the spirit of folly, addresses herself by saying, stolen water is sweet and bread is eaten in secret is pleasant. The lure of the sphere of mirages, following the book of Proverbs, is therefore stolen water, i.e. the mobile element which flows and sweeps consciousness away in a delicious current of easily won illuminations and inspirations without consciousness having to make a moral effort, which is summarized in the 3 words cross, prayer, and penitence. So he's wanting to link this idea of folly to the strange waters referred to in Proverbs, and to the false Holy Spirit, and to essentially like avoidance of the cross.
Well, I recently wrote my Substack about my discussion with my 2 kids on Father's Day about DMT. Did you catch that?
Oh, I missed that one.
And so I think that's an example of that's from what I've never done this stuff, but from what I understand, it seems more real than real when you get there, and then you get there immediately too.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's precisely the kind of thing Tomberg is talking about.
Exactly.
And I'm not just, and to be very, very clear, I don't think what he says about the mirage or about intoxication and the ecstatic, I don't think he's wrong about that. I think he's wrong to link folly to that.
But what's your definition of folly? Because I think maybe we're stumbling around on that.
Yeah. But it is folly. Because
is folly fun and joy is not fun?
Well, it can be, right?
Just
fun
wondering.
when you're a kid, right? it's stupid, right? So here, wait, let me tell you, this is what my sons were telling me. So my son Aiden, who's 22, we're sitting around. My older son bought me this bottle of cherry infused whiskey, which was so good. But
Which
so
was
we're
what?
taking a sip of this whiskey, and
Okay.
Aiden is telling me, that he'd been reading all this stuff. The kid's really smart, reads a lot of books. And he was asking me if I knew anything about lucid dreaming or DMT. I said, well, no. And then Brendan, my oldest son, who's 33, starts talking. He said, yeah, I got this friend who was doing it DMT. He was really into it. And the first time he did it, he met the elves, right? And they're talking to him, and then he did it again. He saw him again, but after he did it a few times, and he always went back to the same place, the elves were like, "Hey, you shouldn't really be here. I just want to let you know." And then he did it one more time, and the elves were like, "Hey, I thought I told you not to come back here. You better stay out of here."
Yeah.
And he got kind of freaked. His friend got kind of freaked out and never went back.
Yeah.
But that's an example to me of folly.
Mhm.
And interesting, and it's an inorganic or inauthentic entry into the imagination in a way, right? And
Yeah.
also potentially dangerous.
Yeah, and McDonald talks about it. I think I read the quote a long time ago about the woman who stays home and occupies herself with the new dress, or even worse, the means of procuring it, right? Like that's his version of fancy, which I think falls under this same category of folly.
Yeah, I think he's like,
And
like they're definitely like, I mean, the etymology of folly supports like the way he's using it too.
Well,
But
and
I can't,
folly,
but I think of like I can't think of it like folie, and like it's also like this. I think its root meaning is delight, and that's the part of like that's the sense of folly that I'm wanting to say like.
But that's joy.
but
That's
in
how Tomberg refers back to the delight in Eden, right? As joy, as
the
that
point,
deep joy.
But
I
that's
think
actually, but that's like the old French meaning of folie is delight. Like that's what it
right.
means.
But Tomberg's not drawing on the French meaning. He's drawing
No,
on folly as the anti-Sophia in Proverbs.
right. That's what I'm
So
trying to.
so we should understand. So we should understand. Okay, so I think I'm getting what he's doing here, and I think I just got hung up on like, well, I have this other like when I hear the word folly, I just like have this other association. Although I know, like, I mean, I'm aware of the meaning that he's using here, which is actually the predominant meaning.
You
So
know
I'm the one who's being weird.
you know that you know the idea of carnival,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and Purim in Judaism,
Right.
right? Those celebrations are opportunities to fall into the folly, right? It's like an escape button, right? Where you're not constantly like focused into this divine imagination and seeking out the works of God, but once a year you can just go straight up folly.
You know what? I think I'm finally getting it. I think I'm finally
getting
getting it. I'm getting it, and it's like as usual. It's Barfield who helps me get it here. I've actually developed a framework to like, but I think I understand where he's coming from a little bit better now. So notice that he does talk of like he talks about the use like the Garden of Delight translation in the Septuagint for the Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah.
Like the Septuagint calls it, links delight to the garden. So there's a way in which, and you bring up Carnival is what made this click for me. So there's a way in which it's like there's a way that we want to approach God that was accessible to us in a prelapsarian state that is tied to the Garden of Delight, where it was like careless and free and effortless, right? Which I would link to the consciousness of original participation. But we've fallen out of that, and there's no going back there.
Right.
So what a lot of what the mirage is that it, and he's very clear that the mirage is not simply illusion, that there's truth in the mirage.
Yeah.
So what the mirage is the thing that's trying to seduce you back,
Back to the
you can just get back to Eden
right.
without the cross.
And the stolen water in Proverbs is to me, it's unearned wisdom.
Yeah.
Folly
Well,
is the opposite of Sophia.
Because it is
right?
unearned, because it's given. But that's
It's stolen.
But here's the thing, though. This is why it bothered me, though, because at some point, like, yes, it's like we do need to come to an understanding and a vision of the world that is of it as like given in that way, given to us in that way,
right.
which is what I was talking about when I first came on before we started recording. We do have to get there, but we can only the only proper way to get there is through Christ. There's no way of getting there.
And I think the example I got for my kids about DMT, and he talks about other occult practices in here, right? Which are taken uncritically, right? Not being prudent about what one is experiencing,
right?
And so, and I think really related to that is so what's the name? The Changing Light at Sandover. You know that book by James Merrill, the poet, and it's basically 500 pages of poetry that were born of his and his partner's experience using a Ouija board, right?
Oh wow.
And all kinds of people come through there to talk to them, like Auden and Yates and whoever, all these other people, right? And he said, it's the funny thing, it's an epic poem and it's a formalist poem. And this is exactly the kind of poem that the Catholic formalists don't want to touch. But I read it because I wrote my dissertation. I wrote a chapter on John Dee and his so-called discussions with angels or spirits.
Right.
And the reason I did that is because as a young man, I had experience doing that in my 20s. I was at my girlfriend's house and we just started dating. She goes, I have this Ouija board. You want to try it? I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't care. And it worked. Okay. And it didn't just kind of work. It super worked. Right. And it was certainly, there's no way you could attribute it to being either me or the woman or anything else. And then my wife, Bonnie, told me she knew her friend's younger sister. So Bonnie was probably 17, or her friend's sister was probably 13. And they were messing around, or she was messing around with it. And she was using a wine glass for the planchette, the indicator. And she didn't have to touch the wine glass for it to move, right?
Wow.
But what happens with those kinds of things is it starts off, wow, this is and he calls it here intoxicating, right? But then it gets weird. And it happened with William Butler Yeats too, in his book of Vision. And he even admits it in the letter he prefaces.
Yeah, and it's because you seek he talks about that in and a lot of you seek the force. Remember that?
But it's imagination achieved by technological aims.
Yeah.
Which is, whether it's a Ouija board or a crystal ball or whatever happens to be, right?
Yeah.
You're using techno, and that was my
speaking of technological means, like people often call those DMT elves, they call them machine elves.
Yeah.
So
yeah, where is that now? I'm thinking about that.
Oh, hey, hold on, I gotta go take care of the plumber.
Sure.
No problem. I'll keep talking with Sherry.
The chaste mind seeks the truth and not the joy of revelation of the truth, just as chaste love seeks union with the loved one and not the carnal pleasure of union. The chaste mind is therefore sober. It does not let itself be swept away by the stolen water, which is sweet, i.e., by the intoxication arising from the ready afflux gratis of floods of illuminations, concerning which Solomon warns us in the book of Proverbs. The poor mind refuses to drink the stolen water, because he's talking about poverty, chastity, and obedience, right? So poverty. Since it seeks only what is essential to the life of the body, the life of the soul, and the life of the spirit, It does not seek the superfluous, even if it is spiritual, and will not accept the invitation to take part in the orgy of spiritual illumination that the sphere of mirages offers it. The obedient mind has an awake and cultivated sense of obedience, i.e., the spiritual hearing of the will, which renders it capable of recognizing the voice of truth and distinguishing it from other voices. It is to this spiritual hearing, developed by obedience, that the Gospel of St. John refers in the following passage. He who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. True obedience is not at all the subjugation of the will to another, but rather the moral clairaudience of the will. That's a first for me, that word.
Not for me, because I play D&D.
What does that mean?
There's a clairaudience spell. It means like clear hearing, basically. It's
Okay,
like,
clear hearing.
Well, yeah. So what the clairaudience spell does in D&D is allow you to be able to like hear things like clearly at a distance.
Okay.
So
A clairaudience of the will, the faculty of knowing and recognizing the voice of truth.
you know the word clairvoyance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which the clairaudience is
clear
the
seeing.
auditory the auditory equivalent of clairvoyance.
Right. And it is this which renders the soul inaccessible to the lures of the sphere of images. Although no practicing esotericist is sheltered from the sphere of mirages, he who has made the vows of obedience, poverty, and chastity an affair of the heart will come out victorious from the confrontation with this sphere. If St. Anthony said radically no salvation without temptation, one could add no temptation vanquished without the three vows. And then further over here, he says, it's on page 641. It's the second paragraph. For this reason, the rule of every serious esotericist should be to be silent, often for a length of years, concerning every new illumination or inspiration that he has, so as to give it the necessary time to mature, i.e., to acquire that certainty which results from its accordance with moral consciousness, moral logic, the totality of spiritual and ordinary personal experience, and that of friends and spiritual guides of the past and present, as also with divine revelation, whose eternal dogmas are guiding consolations in the intellectual and moral heaven. And it will be only after having arrived at such an accordance that a personal illumination or inspiration can be considered communicable and presentable. And I mean, that really speaks to me, because, as you know, I've had, several illuminations in my life that I just couldn't share. I didn't feel like I had permission to share those things until recently, right? Where because I had to think about them, I had to see them in the world. I had to encounter them in things that I read. I don't know, I just couldn't talk about them. And it wasn't because I felt afraid to talk about them. I felt like I didn't have permission to talk about them.
Yeah, it's interesting that he ties that to, he's talking about moral certainty here, not intellectual certainty, because the kinds of things he's talking about are not of the,
no,
they're not even of the,
and it's true. Like there's a sense that I had of not being able to talk about them was a moral imperative. It would have been morally wrong for me. It would have been a kind of grasping at power, right? To talk about them. Like, as we were talking about this, mirages and Ouija boards and all that, when I was in grade 8, I went to a middle school. So it was just grade 7 and 8. And they were at that time in the 70s and stuff, they're doing all this kind of experimental education. And they had these, what they called pod classes. And so it would be 3 normal sized classes all together. And we had to pick a project. We had to write a hypothesis. Then we had to, do the experiment. And then we had, it was a totally scientific, what do they call that? Method.
Right.
And we could form our own groups. So it was real freewheeling, eh? Like, you could think your own ideas up, you could form your own groups, but you had to follow the scientific method, and then you had to write a little report or whatever. And so I decided I wanted to find out if the spiritual realm was real. That was my hypothesis, that it was. And so I formed a group, and we could all go off into little corners. So there was a few extra rooms in the room. And so we would, as part of the experimentation, we would perform seances, we would levitate people, we would play with Ouija boards or do the whole thing. And I've sensed at that time that I could have crossed a line into the occult, which would have been for the purposes of wielding power. I felt that in myself.
Right.
And you
I
see
felt
that,
it.
yeah, you see that with I talked to a lot of students and kids over the years who get attracted to the occult because they feel vulnerable and they need, they feel weak or whatever. They need power, right? Or they feel
Yeah.
they need power. They feel that will give them power.
Yeah, or maybe they also feel an affinity to the spiritual realm. Like there are thin places for them. Maybe, I don't know. I just felt like that for me, and I knew that I had to not go there because there was a possibility that if I tasted of it, I might not go back. I knew that. There's another example in my own personal life where I was hospitalized because I was going through a really difficult time. And the diagnosis was that I needed at least 2 years in institution. Okay. In a women's institution, mental institution, to recover. And I thought to myself, if I go there, I'll never come back. I'll never come back. I'll never be me again. And it would have been nice to go there because my food would have all been served to me. I would have been given lots of really good drugs and I wouldn't have had to think about anything, right? But I knew that if I went there, I would never come back. And so I didn't, and it was the same feeling I had when I was playing around with all this spiritual stuff, right? With my friends. And I think we know those places. Like, at least I did. I think we do make some kind of choice to step into that sphere of the false Holy Spirit, right?
Right. Well, I think the reason young people are attracted to that is because like we mentioned earlier, but their experience of education and even of religion is so disenchanted. And they know there's got to be something more out there than what they're telling me in church and at school, right?
Yeah.
That there is no folk, kind of folk wisdom.
But sorcery and divine magic both offer enchantment.
Yeah, and they do that, and because you're looking, if you feel dissatisfied, this is why I think kids become neo-pagans, because they're at church and wow, this is boring, and I want to be connected to something, please, right? I want to be connected to nature. I want to be connected to the sun, the stars, and the moon. And what they get is a box of envelopes and RCIA instruction. Right? Oh God, shoot me now. That's right. But I think that's true. And if we had culture or family life, and I see this with healthy families that I know that acknowledge the invisible world as a given, and it's almost like when they talk about in Europe where there's not a drinking age in some countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kids aren't attracted to it. But here in this country, and probably in Canada, but certainly in this country, where it's you can't drink till you're 21, then it becomes a Pandora's box thing, right? You're like, you can't do this, but I have to do it because I can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're gonna be attracted to what they tell you not to do, and also you're gonna feel dissatisfied with what you have if it is not nourishing one part of your being.
Yeah.
right?
Well, the Mirage
In
is
a
interesting.
materialistic, moralistic version of things, you're going to look for something else.
The Mirage is a
That's the way
great
I was
metaphor.
as a kid. You know,
Yeah.
I would ask questions. You know, I was interested in, like, I went to Catholic school, so I wanted to know about when the Virgin Mary appeared to the kids at Fatima or Saint Bernadette at Lourdes. You know, I was like, "Can you tell me about this? What can we talk about that in school?" No, you're talking about the catechism. I want to talk about this stuff. Does this really happen? And they would never talk about it,
Mhm.
right? And so kids look for their own experiences like that. I mean, who would not want to see the Virgin Mary?
There, you were trying to say something about Mirage.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, like the world of Mirage is it's an interesting metaphor because, like he said, you know, it can excite you, right? Like when I think about myself being in, it's so interesting, like because I've had really good encounters with the Holy Spirit, and I've had encounters with the false Holy Spirit, right? And so the mirage and the divine imagination, let's say, and you're the one like the experience I had with God, the mystical experiences I had with God, I just tucked them away. They were just tucked away, and they weren't for anybody, and they were sacred, and I didn't have control of that. I didn't feel like I did. I only had a space for them. But the mirages, it was like you could choose to run after them. I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like you could choose to pursue that, right? And you would be, I think, only doing that in order to have some kind of power or status or something like that. Like it would be a grasping thing, like a possession of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the more intimate you know, encounters that I had with the Holy Spirit, I didn't own them. I didn't even have permission to talk about them. They weren't mine, right?
Well, actually, kind of, it ties back to what Tomberg said much earlier in the book when he was talking about idolatry, where Tomberg sees like power as the root of all idolatry.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's safe to connect the lure of the mirage to idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
it's also when he talked, I think it's in the letter on the Hangman, maybe, where he talks about, the temptation for occultists to spiritual megalomania, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing here. Look what I can do.
Yeah.
I have conversed
I am
with
an enlightened one,
I
and
have
you're not.
conversed with angels,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is what happened to John Dee, right? And he was a good guy. I mean, he was basically a good human being, but he got
Well,
played.
yeah.
You know,
And
I
George
tell
McDonald.
people when people say, "Well, do you really think he was talking to angels?" Or when you're doing Ouija board, oh, here's what it's like, right? I think just punch 7 random numbers on your phone and have somebody answer the phone. You said, "Yes, yes, I'd like to speak to Jesus." Yeah, and the spirits are like, "He thinks it's Jesus." Jesus speaking, right? That's what they do because he talks about it early in the book too. Because the hierarchy of the left wants to make us look like the dummies we are. So
Mhm.
they'll string us along, which is what I think they were. Well, Yates
Yeah,
admits that they did that to him,
I
but I
can
think
I can remember in my high school French class, I must have been like my junior year, no, sophomore year, because the last year I took French was my sophomore year because they wouldn't give me an independent contract to keep studying French because I'd like completed all 4 years by my sophomore year. And uh we actually, like, someone brought a Ouija board to our to a class party,
really
and we played around with the Ouija board at this class party in
that's
French
cool.
class. And it the like the spirit was a dead Estonian logger who died in 1906, allegedly. Nothing fancy, just like this, like
My name is Jeff
dead
from
Estonian logger
beyond.
who died in 1906, which is kind of I'm like, and Aberdeen's like a logging town, so like I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. But it was nobody important.
It's okay.
He was important because he was from the other side.
Well, it's interesting. It reminded me. I don't know what I did with this book, but my first time in a used bookstore, I was 18 years old. I bought this book for $3, I think it was. It was from the age of Spiritism, and it was and I didn't know what it was. It just looked kind of interesting. There was this, these people who were doing seances conversing with spirits, and it was like the transcripts from all this. I don't know what happened to that book. I think it fell apart years ago.
Speaking of books,
You used it for toilet paper in the
speaking of
outhouse.
books, like early on in the chapter when he's talking about the world as a work of art, he references he has an italicized text, so he references, I don't know if it's a book, it might be a poem by Edward Carpenter that has that title.
Right.
Google cannot find that.
Oh, really?
I cannot find it. I found out who Edward Carpenter is, so I know who he is, and he's an interesting character, and it's an interesting person for Tom Burke to quote.
It might be under a different title. You think?
It could, maybe. I don't know. I couldn't find it under that title, but
Yeah.
he was a socialist utopian poet.
Okay. Interesting.
Who like basically was in the Victorian era.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna throw us into different territory here.
It's very un-Tom Burke like to quote a socialist.
I have to do this because I have to poke the bear, and the bear's right over here, right there, with all the fur on his face.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Every sacred art is therefore founded on a science of forms, or in other words, on the symbolism inherent in forms. It must be borne in mind that a symbol is not merely a conventional sign. It manifests its archetype by virtue of definite ontological law, which is exactly what MacDonald says. The meaning is already in the forms, right? A symbol is, in a certain sense, that to which it gives expression. For this very reason, traditional symbolism is never without beauty. According to the spiritual view of the world, the beauty of an object is nothing but the transparency of its existential envelopes. An art worthy of the name is beautiful because it is true. That's a quote from Titus Burckhardt.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tom Burke says,
you're gonna get to the Renaissance bit, aren't you?
That's
why you're saying you're poking the bear.
Tom Burke says sacred art is therefore founded upon a science of forms and not upon subjective artistic creative elan or upon the subject as such. When historians of art, and this is a quote again from Titus Burckhardt, when historians of art apply the term sacred art to any and every work that has a religious subject, they are forgetting that art is essentially form. And the meaning is already in the forms, right? According to MacDonald. An art cannot properly be called sacred solely on the grounds that its subjects originate in a spiritual truth. Its formal language also must bear witness to a similar origin. Such is by no means the case with a religious art like that of the Renaissance or of the Baroque period, which is in no way distinct, so far as style is concerned, from the fundamentally profane art of that era. Neither the subjects which it borrows in a wholly exterior and, as it were, literary manner from religion, nor the devotional feelings with which it is permeated in appropriate cases, nor even the nobility of soul which sometimes finds expression in it, suffice to confer on it a sacred character. No art merits that epithet unless its forms themselves reflect the spiritual vision characteristic of a particular religion. The doctrine common to traditional civilizations prescribes that sacred art must imitate the divine art. But it must be clearly understood that this in no way implies that the complete divine creation, the world such as we see it, should be copied, for such would be pure pretension. A literal naturalism is foreign to sacred art. What must be copied is the way in which the divine spirit works. Its laws must be transposed into the restricted domain in which man works as man, that is to say, into artisanship. Okay, there you go, Mr. Bear.
Where are the forms?
Where are the forms in creation?
Mm-hmm. I think that just that observation alone, like, completely undoes everything that is said in that paragraph.
Well, no, because no, I think he precedes that quote with,
No, because he's talking about the forms as handed down by tradition.
it is founded on
And
the
then he
science of
warns
forms.
against, simply copying the forms as observed from nature. And I'm saying, oh no, we can copy the forms as observed from nature because all the forms are come from the mind of God, and therefore we can in fact observe the book of nature and create from the book of nature directly. In fact, that's what it means to be a human being.
Okay, but he says sacred art is founded upon a science of forms and not upon the subjective artistic creative elan or upon the subject as such.
Right.
And then further down,
But why
he says,
why does he assume, here's where he's making a jump. Here's where he's making a leap in logic in my point from my perspective. He assumes that if you are not following the traditional handed down form, that the only explanation for that is that, well, it's just your subjective creative elan, and there's no other possible explanation for that. That's where I think he's wrong, very wrong.
okay, well, further down, he says, it remains only to add to what Titus Burckhardt says that the transposition of the way in which the divine spirit works in the domain of human artisanship presupposes the three traditional vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. Purification must precede illumination and perfection. Sacred art, which imitates the way in which the divine spirit works, requires that the soul of the artist rids itself of its own inclinations and habits, i.e., that it becomes poor so as to be able to receive the wealth of the divine spirit, that it reduces its own fantasy and its own predilections to silence, i.e., that it is chaste so as not to disturb the limpid waters flowing from the divine source, and that it is obedient so as to be able to imitate the divine spirit at work, i.e., to be able to work in concert with the divine spirit.
Right, but it is only the divine spirit to which one is obligated as an artist to bear witness. It is not like you're not obligated to bear witness to the traditions of men and to be stuck in only reproducing the same thing over and over again in perpetuity. Oh, you're muted, Michael.
Which is the problem with tradies, right?
Well, this is my problem. This is like the one huge disagreement I have with Pajot. And I also, and it's funny because Holberg normally talks about the Renaissance in positive terms throughout the entire book. And here we come to the last chapter, and it's like, and all of a sudden he's like expressing this distaste for Renaissance art. And it's like, I'm not with you, buddy.
Well,
I don't get it.
Well, some Renaissance art, I mean, it is reduced to formula, right? Where it's all about vanishing points and perspective and things like this, right? And it gets kind of sterile that way. Unlike Michelangelo and Leonardo and Raphael, who have what's his name, Botticelli, who brings sublimity to their work as well as that kind of scientific exactness, right? So I think there's that. But also, if you move closer into the 20th century, T.S. Eliot's a great example, right? Who he's as traditionalist by personality as you can get, but also one of the most innovative poets of the century, right? And I can't get when traddy poets will, and I hear from them all the time, and I just don't get it, will get banging on about exact rhyme and poetry or sonnet sequences or like that's the way to write traditionalist poet. What about T.S. Eliot?
Right.
You know, he was a traditionalist, but he was imaginative and he was innovative. And the same thing you could say, he was Eliot was inspired by the French symbolists.
Well, the problem is
right?
confusing form with the forms. So like I would agree that you like if art is going to be, if we're gonna dare to use the term sacred to refer to any art, then it has to reflect the forms as such as they are in the imagination of God. 100% agree with that, and it
But
can't be.
that's the thing is people they come with they I must create my own system or be enslaved by another man's, right? They create a system of forms. This is what happened with the Renaissance. You had a system now of perspective and all these
Yeah.
things, which was good, but it's not the ultimate, right? It's not everything. And then people feel that's restrictive or constraining because even that does not allow one to express some truths, right? It
Yeah, I
becomes
think
a hindrance.
from what I'm
Right,
gathering,
and the key here is it comes down to this, like, okay, so I agree with the idea that it can't be just like subjective creative Elan, which would be like the spirit of the mirage. I agree with that. He's right about that. I agree with him. But I don't think that, like, the idea that all art that challenges traditional form is created out of that.
well,
I
maybe
just
that's
don't
not
think
what he's
is
saying.
I don't
Maybe
think
that's
is
not
true.
I don't think that's what he's saying though. Like, I think he's I don't know much about Renaissance and Baroque art, to be honest with you. I just wanted to poke the bear.
But hey, so we're kind of running long here.
Yeah.
Before we end though, we have got to talk about how he ends this book and this
Mhm.
chapter.
Okay.
Because it's
Do
kind
it.
of interesting, right? Where he passes the baton.
He does. Yeah. He says,
Yeah.
hey, you.
And I love, I mean, what page is this?
And see,
Where
look
he-
at this. I circled this here. You see that word? Adieu.
Adieu.
Adieu. Yeah.
To God.
That to God.
Yeah.
That's what he dips it all up to, right?
Yeah.
But the
Adieu.
page right there, that one, the Kabbalah, right? The tree.
Right.
I can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
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 And I think that's really fascinating, the way to look at the minor arcana.
I know. I wish he would have written a book after he said
No, he left it to
what he
his
said about the
readers.
minor arcana. I'm like, no, and he didn't write a book.
And the first, well, so of course, when I read this book when I was 23, maybe I'll write that next book on the lower. No, hell no. And people have asked me before, I'm like, no, I don't have, no. Though I do know there's supposed to be a guy who's connected to a couple circles I know about. I've never talked to the guy who's supposed to be writing up part 2 on the minor arcana, which I don't know, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do.
Well,
I can feel it.
It's amazing how much is actually going on in this letter, because I really I thought, like, the part of that section that I found, like, that was the most illuminating for me was his explanation of what the different suits
Oh, that was awesome.
of the minor arcana are doing.
World of
And
Coins, the World of Coins, and the cups.
yeah, and to
the
me, it like
swords
kind
and-
of like it create, to me, it's like, again, I get like Barfield is my muse, I guess, but it's like it
Right.
becomes a perfect metaphor for the evolution of consciousness.
But
Like, that's
yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
I assume, I don't know. I assume that this is not his invention, but that this was part of the system that he studied in Russia when he was a kid.
yeah.
I'm guessing that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's really beautiful. I mean, the way he puts it out there, it's, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
And every time I read that, I could go, I should study the Kabbalah again. I don't have time. But I used to read a lot of Kabbalah stuff way back in the day. It's so fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
one of the things I thought about tackling next here on Grill Country was to dive into one of the major Kabbalistic texts. That's something I toyed around with. But I think I'm going to go with, I think our next project is going to be this like theme of the transformation of Eros, and probably bring in several different books, and maybe not just books, maybe some films and some other stuff too. We'll see.
Can you
I'm
do
still,
that? Oh, you mean talking about the films?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Maybe I don't want to really. I'm just thinking to myself. I definitely need to bring in some poetry. 100% for sure. In fact, I'm thinking about starting with the Divine Comedy as like the first thing to do. So,
okay.
Yep. I think that's as good a place as any to wrap up. I think I'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to do like one more kind of like putting a bow on it wrap up episode where we just kind of like talk about whatever.
Party. We'll have a party.
Yeah. Virtual
We
party.
have to
with-
wear our infinity hats and hold things lightly in our fingertips.
Here we go.
I was
Yeah.
just gonna drink meat, but okay.
Maybe we should. Yeah, in fact, maybe we should do it. Actually, maybe we should do it as maybe we should do it as a live stream and kind of invite our audience in to participate.
Yeah.
Sure, that'd be fun.
Let's do that. Okay.
Maybe that,
Well,
that
thank
one,
you.
that one
Thank-
heckler too. He could
Thank
come.
you for joining me. I have enjoyed this so much. I was kind of like I was looking forward to this as I always am, but I was also kind of dreading it because it means we're drawing to the end of it, and it's been so awesome. Michael, I hope you continue to do stuff with us in the future.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful to get to know you and to do this with you. And
Yeah.
Sherry,
Really. Mhm.
couldn't have done this without you. Thank you both.
Yeah, there's no ley line here in my office. A
All right.
lot of fun, guys.
Yeah, definitely. As
We'll
always.
see you. We'll wrap it up next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.